Hey everyone, Marshall Couch here. I thought I would do a little video to talk about the Automation Anywhere tool and then show you just a small program and talk through some useful commands that will allow you to build your first bot. A bot is just a program in Automation Anywhere that you could later run on a bot runner. So it allows you some cool capabilities to build tasks and then deploy them and run them on other machines in a corporate world. We'll be going through something very small that you can do all at home without having to have a bunch of corporate software or anything set up. Right now, we are in the Automation Anywhere main window. This is where we can see the different files that we have. Under My Tasks, these are going to be our task bots, or just our bots. We also have some other things here, mostly for navigation. In a corporate world, there are some other things you might do, particularly connecting to the control room or the repository, which would be Control S. I can't do that here and see anything particularly useful because it's only my computer, so I haven't actually uploaded anything because I don't have any need to upload anything. There are also your metabots here, again, just navigating around. You can see what you've got. As well as in My Task, you also have the document section, which is where you might put some configuration files or some template files, or if you really wanted to, you could even put your output files there for just your personal use. So what we're going to do is we're going to build the automation I did in my first video. We'll build the precursor to that automation, which actually allowed me to create a bunch of documents out of a single document. So to do that, we're going to open up the Workbench. To do that, just click New up here in the top left and click Workbench. There are some recorders you may have noticed. Here, whenever I click New, I get the option to use some of the recorders. And there's also this record button up here in the top left. Your mileage may vary depending on what you're recording. Sometimes you can record some steps and then go back and actually kind of make it to where it can run over and over again. But how easy that really is depends on what you're doing. For what we're going to do is we're going to go straight to the Workbench and kind of do things manually. This is the Workbench window. It's the new window. It's the window you would have noticed from the first video that I did. I just went straight to this window. I didn't worry about that first window. But what we're going to be doing here is actually creating our own bot in this window. And we're going to do that kind of manually. What we're going to be doing is we are going to build a bunch of documents that we can later come back and combine. For my first video, you might remember if I open this folder up, I took a bunch of files that were all separate, 50 different files, and I combined them into a single file. The way that I actually got those 50 files to start with was I created an RPA bot that split out a single file into a bunch of different files. So I kind of went from one file to 50 files, and then I went back to one file. So we're going to start out with just taking that one file and splitting it into the 50 files. That way then we can later go back, and if we want to, we can see how to build that one file out of those 50 files. So what we're going to do is open up your preferred browser. I'm just using Internet Explorer because I'm bad. Don't worry about that. But you're going to want to go to lipsum.com, or if you just Google search for lorem ipsum, this text right here, lorem ipsum. This is basically just generic text that gets generated for web page development, stuff like that. I think it's just Latin. I think it's a Latin speech or something like that. But it basically allows people to focus on the text, but it gives us a really easy way to generate as much text as we want. So here we are going to do 50 paragraphs and just click Generate Lorem Ipsum. So here we now have 50 paragraphs. So what we're going to do is just copy and highlight all of this. So I'm just going to shift click on the bottom, hit Control C. I'm going to come over here to Notepad and I'm just going to paste that in. What you might notice, so as you open up Notepad and you put this in, you may be seeing it as this. Something that's kind of convenient about this is it's not formatted particularly well. So it allows us to easily kind of change and work with in Automation Anywhere. Because every single paragraph is actually its own line with a blank line in between, that makes things really easy to work with. So kind of keep that in mind. I had word wrap turned on to make it look a little bit nicer. So go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm just going to save this as something. Let's see here. I'm going to save this out here on my E drive. and RPA. And I'm going to call this something like just lorem ipsum. And I'm not going to do spaces because that, again, will make things a little bit easier on us. And we're going to do this as a .txt. Okay. And we're going to do one more piece of setup. I'm going to open up where I just saved that, and I'm actually going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it maybe split documents or something like that. And that'll be the place where I actually save all of my split documents. We could create this folder in our RPA, but because it's a one-time thing and I only ever want to create it once, it kind of makes more sense for me to just go ahead and create it manually right now. If you wanted to have a bot that goes out and creates this folder on a bunch of different machines, then it would make more sense to do it with the RPA. The way that we're doing it, we're just going to do it once, really, and we'll loop other things. So we won't worry too much about that. So we've got that file, we've got that folder. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a bot that reads that file in and then creates all of those different documents for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start using some of these commands over on the left side of my screen, and I'll kind of walk you through them as we use them. But the first one we want to use is called read file. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. Let's see, I didn't actually need to scroll down. It's right here. Read from CSV/text. So I'm just going to drag that in. And something to note here, whenever we go to navigate to that, notice that there's radio buttons up at the top. You do want to go ahead and select text up here. It does change the box just a little bit. And this will allow us to read that pretty easily. So I'm just going to click these three dots, and I'm already in my RPA area. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this lorem ipsum.txt. And we're pretty much good to go with dragging in that first command. All we had to do is drag it in, select text, and this is actually going to read the text a little bit more like a program would versus how a human would. It's not going to pull that text document up. It's actually just going to read it straight into the program, and we'll work with it that way. So this will be a little bit different from maybe some of the other RPA that you'll use. This will be a little bit more like a standard program, but this is kind of the setup for the program that we'll write after this, which is taking that document and then combining all of them, or taking all of those documents and then combining them back. We'll do that in a much more human-like way. This will be a little bit more like a computer. So we'll go ahead and click Save. And whenever I do that, you'll notice it actually adds quite a few lines. It adds 4 lines for me. Number 1 is just the read text, but then it also automatically adds a loop for me. And a loop is really where the benefit of RPA comes in. The benefit of RPA is RPA can do things over and over again, much more reliably than a human can. Humans are likely to get tired if they're copying and pasting a lot. It's possible that they miss a document. It's possible that they forget what document they're on. So loops are really where RPA find their value. If you're building an RPA and it's just step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and then there's never a repeat, RPA may not be a great choice because it might be easier for you to just go through and do those steps, especially if there's a long list of steps. It might take longer to build that RPA than it is to just kind of do the process once or twice a month or something like that. So loops are really where we get value in RPA. This loop is going to go through every single line in our file. So that's pretty cool, and that it already built that for us. And there's also a comment in here that tells us how to use or how to get to the value that is coming out of that text file line by line. It may not be entirely clear because you're not familiar with variables yet, but it does say use this variable file data column for each record in the file. So variables are referenced by using these dollar signs around them, and it's actually super easy to insert them, and we'll kind of see that in just a second. So let's go ahead and just start working through this. We are going to need a variable for this because we need to figure out if it's actually one of the lines we care about or if it's one of those blank lines. So it inserted a line and then a blank line, then a line, then a blank line whenever we copied from the Lorem Ipsum website. So we actually want to track and make sure that we're only getting the values that are not blanks. So what we're going to do to make that happen is just make sure that the value or the length of that text, or a string as it's called here. We're going to make sure that length of text is longer than just a single character, just a space. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable, and let's just call it text length or something like that. Text length, and this is going to tell us if the value of the row that we're currently looking at is longer than a certain amount. So we're going to save that. And if you missed that, the variables is over on the right side of your screen under this variable manager. So it may be kind of hidden. So if you click variable manager, this pane should pop up on the right side of your screen. Then you can click add down at the bottom. It should pop up this window that you see here on my screen. And then for the name, just type text length. Okay, text length, or something similar if you're following along at home. I'm going to click save. Here it's telling me you're not actually giving us a value yet. I'm going to say that's fine because I'm going to set that value in the RPA. So now what we want to do is actually get the text length. So we have a variable to store it, but we actually need to figure out what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a string operation. So I didn't need to scroll down again, but over on the left side there is string operation, and then there is length. So we're going to drag length in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to just say the length, and then I need a source string, and this is the string that I am getting the length of. So if you'll remember, I said this comment nicely tells us what variable we want to use. We want to use file data column, and then down here, there's a tip that says press F2 to insert variable. That's the best button in this entire application is F2 because it's going to allow you to insert variables. So remember that, F2, and you're going to see it in a lot of places. This tip will show up in a lot of places. So you can click here for source string and hit F2, and this should pull up your variable listing. So here we can see our variable that we defined, that text length. But then if we scroll down, or if we click into it and just hit F, it'll take us there a little quicker. We can find the file data column, and that's the one that Automation Anywhere was telling us to use to reference a line of text as we're reading through this file. So let's go ahead and click Insert. And what we're going to do now is give it a column number. We're just going to go ahead and put 1 because there's only one column in this text. I'm not sure why you have to choose the data column in CSV and text. I guess it's possible to delimit text as well and not just CSV. We've got our source string. We're going to get the length of this text variable as it is. And what we're going to do is we are going to assign that to text length. So we're going to take whatever the current value is for the file data column, which is the row of data from that text file that we're on. We're going to get the length of it, and we're going to store that to text length. So we're going to go ahead and save that. And now we have a variable that, as we're going through, is going to be changing every time we go through the loop. Something to note is that whenever I did click and drag, I did drag it into the loop. I dragged it onto the comment to make sure that it actually shows up in the loop. So whenever you're clicking to drag things onto the action list, be sure that you're dragging it to the right place. So now that I've got the length of my string, I can kind of tell myself what I want to do with it. Another variable that we are going to need is a counter variable to just keep track of how many documents we've created. We want to give each of these documents some sort of different name. So in my previous video, it was document 1, document 2. So we're going to add another variable, and we'll just call it document counter. Document counter. And we will start that at 1. So if you want, go ahead and put a 1 in there. So document counter, and we've got it a default value of 1. So now what we want to do is we want to add an if. So if I scroll up a little bit, there's the if-else statement. If-else is very useful because it allows us to create forks in our logic, or basically create different paths in our logic. So here what we want to do is if the text length is greater than a certain value, so if it's greater than 1, then we want to do a certain thing. But if it's not, then we don't really want to do anything. We just want to move on to the next value. So what we'll do for this is we will find if and then find variable. Do notice that the things underneath if else are not alphabetically organized. So just something to keep in mind. So find variable in there. And I'm going to drag that on top of our string operation. And now what I can do is, notice here I can re-choose if I chose the wrong thing and dragged it in. You do have to drag in one of these child logic pieces, child commands. You can't just drag in if else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to give it the variable with F2. Notice I've got that tip again. It tells me to use the variables. And I'm going to grab the text length, and I'm going to say if it's greater than, so just go to the operator and choose greater than, and here I'm going to say 1. If the text length is greater than 1, I know that it was a valid line. It wasn't just one of those lines with a space in it. So I'm going to save that, and then it automatically puts in a few lines for me. It puts in my if, and then it puts in my end if. And then it puts in a comment in between that says add the conditional commands. So whatever commands I want to execute whenever it is greater than 1 need to go in here. Now what I want to do is I want to actually write to a document. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the log command because we're just using text files. So log's going to make it a little bit easier for me. So let's find my log2 file here in my command list. I'm going to drag log2 file onto this comment, and I'm going to, I guess, go ahead and browse to that folder. So I'm going to put it into my split documents folder that I did create, which you saw me. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file in here, and we'll call it document for now. So let's go ahead and click open, and then it puts that value in there for me. Now what I need to do is I want to go ahead and add in my document counter into the file name. So I'm just going to click onto it, and there's my F2 insert. So I'm going to hit F2, and I'm going to add document counter. And so now it looks kind of all smushed together because it's got the file path, the file name, and then a variable straight in the middle. So it's going to replace this right here with whatever is in that variable at runtime. So whenever it's running this bot, it's going to call this file document, and then the first time it runs, it's going to call it 1. So it's going to save this there. And what we're going to do is we can take this, uncheck this append to file, because every time we want to create a new file anyway. So we'll do that. And then in here, what we want to do is the text that we actually want to write to the file is that file data column. So I'm going to go ahead and click F2 in here. And I'm going to say that I want to scroll down and grab my file data column. And again, I want to put in 1. I just want that first column from the file data, which is that text. So I can save that. And now what I want to do is I want to add 1 to my document counter. Whenever I do that, I want to add 1 to my document counter. So to do that, we're going to go down and find variable operation. So it's kind of like our string operation. String means text, but because now we're not working with text, we want to just do variable operation. So I'm going to drag that in, drag that on top of my log to file. And I'm going to say my document counter is equal to, so just click that drop down, F2, document counter, and then I'm going to say plus 1. Plus 1. I'm going to save that. So now I have this little set of logic that's going to read from the file. It's going to loop through every line. It's going to figure out the length of that line. It's going to make sure that the text length, the length of that text is greater than 1. If it is, it's going to create a new file called document and then the number. And then it's going to increment that document counter number so that we get a new document number the next time we go through this loop. So let's go ahead and save this, and let's call this split documents. And I like to do no spaces, but do capital letters on the first words. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to save that as split documents. And let's go ahead and run this and see if it works. So I'm going to run it. you might be getting a window that pops up on your screen that shows you that it's kind of doing some work, and it actually runs super fast. So mine's already done. So I'm going to go check my split documents folder, and let's see if it worked. So I do appear to have 50 documents. We created 50 paragraphs, so that's good. So let's go ahead and edit one of these, or just open it up, and it looks like it's got some text, and I can see in the preview over here that, hey, I did it. I just split a single document into 50 documents. Now again, this was maybe not the most human-like bot, but it's going to allow us to do our next bot. So I hope you'll join me for the next video where we actually do a little bit more human-like processing and take all of those files that we just created and bring them back into a single file. Thanks for watching.